In the bowels of an ancient fortress, far from the light of day and the warmth of hope, a woman labored in silence. The air was thick with dampness and despair, the walls closing in like the prison she was trapped within. This was no ordinary birth. It was a birth shadowed by cruelty, desperation, and dark ambition, the kind that stained not just flesh, but history itself. She had been condemned to this dungeon for reasons that blurred the line between love and treachery. Her husband, a man consumed by the hunger for power, saw in her confinement a grim necessity. The throne was his prize, but to claim it, sacrifices had to be made, sacrifices that would echo through generations. Here, in this forsaken place beneath stone and iron, life and death danced their tragic duet. The mother's cries were muffled by thick walls, unheard beyond the prison's cold confines. The servants whispered of her fate, eyes cast downward, too fearful to intervene. The castle above basked in the glow of chandeliers and tapestries, oblivious or indifferent to the anguish below. The stark contrast between the grandeur of the throne room and the squalor of the dungeon was a cruel metaphor for the fractured soul of the kingdom itself. As the child was born, the thin beam of a flickering candle revealed a fragile, pale infant wailing into the darkness. Yet this fragile new life was born not into warmth and safety, but into chains of secrecy and shame. The mother, her strength nearly spent, gazed upon her child with a mixture of love and sorrow. Her heart knew the price of this birth, not just her own suffering, but the relentless ambition that imprisoned her both physically and emotionally. This was a birth conceived in shadows, a grim testament to the ruthless political games that defined their world. Each breath the infant took was a whispered promise of power, yet also a harbinger of doom. The husband, now crowned but forever haunted by his deeds, was building a legacy on the fragile bones of the woman who bore his heir in darkness. The dungeon's damp stone walls seemed to close in further with each passing hour. Time itself twisted here, slowed by the weight of secrets and despair. The mother, alone, save for the infant's weak cries, began to unravel under the crushing silence. Her mind, once sharp and vibrant, became a battleground of hope and madness. The very place meant to hold her captive began to consume her identity, erasing the woman beneath the prisoner. Outside, the kingdom moved on, unaware or unwilling to see the human cost behind its gilded veneer. The king's court revelled, oblivious to the whispered prayers and silent suffering buried deep beneath their feet. Power was maintained through a fragile balance of fear and loyalty, and the darkest truths were locked away where no one dared to look. Yet the story of this shadowed birth would not remain hidden forever. History has a way of clawing its way back from the depths, exposing wounds long thought healed. The child born in the dungeon, burdened with the weight of secrecy and betrayal, would one day face the consequences of a legacy built on suffering. But for now, the darkness held sway, cold, unyielding, and absolute. In the stillness of the night, the mother clung to what little hope remained. She whispered promises to the infant, vows that their story would not end in silence. But even as she spoke, the walls seemed to listen and close tighter, threatening to swallow her whole. The throne above was secured, but at what cost? This opening chapter of shadow and sorrow sets the stage for a tale steeped in tragedy and the haunting complexities of power. From this grim beginning, the story will unfold, revealing not just the rise of a king, but the hidden cruelty that secured his reign and the fragile souls caught in its wake. Ruthless ambition is often the true architect of crowns, and in this tale it was no different. The husband's ascent to the throne was forged in blood and betrayal, each step marked by calculated cruelty and the cold calculus of power. Publicly, he was crowned amid fanfare and adulation, a sovereign destined to rule. But behind closed doors, his reign was already shadowed by the sacrifices he had forced upon those closest to him. The court celebrated his coronation with lavish ceremonies, where gold and silk masked the rot at the heart of his kingdom. Yet, even as the people bowed and cheered, the secret of his wife's imprisonment remained locked away, a grim token of the price he was willing to pay. His climb was not the heroic ascent of a rightful ruler, but a merciless struggle that crushed opposition and left ruins in its wake. Allies became enemies overnight. Whispered promises turned to daggers in the dark. Paranoia took root in the king's mind, feeding a growing obsession with control. Every smile in the great hall concealed ulterior motives, every alliance a fragile thread that could unravel. At a moment's notice, his paranoia was no mere madness, but a symptom of the burden he carried, a throne built on bones and broken lives. Meanwhile, the wife's existence became an invisible scar on the kingdom's facade. Her confinement was a secret shame, hidden beneath layers of deception and silence. Her suffering was an unspoken price paid for the king's unchallenged power, a cruel reminder that even royal blood could be shackled when ambition demanded it. The political machinations that brought him to power were ruthless. Rivals were eliminated with surgical precision, dissent crushed beneath the heel of authority. But power bred loneliness, and with each victory, the king's grip on reality weakened. The throne, once a symbol of glory, became a cage of his own making, imprisoning him as surely as his wife was trapped below. This stark contrast between the king's public glory and private cruelty deepens the tragedy. His reign, though resplendent on the surface, was riddled with fractures, cracks that threatened to shatter everything he had built. The shadows of the dungeon below and the glittering court above were forever entwined, two halves of a poisoned whole. As the court whispered of conspiracies and the kingdom held its breath, the king's obsession with power began to bleed into madness. His decisions grew erratic, his cruelty unchecked. The throne, secured by treachery, was no longer a prize but a prison, one that tightened its grip with every passing day. The wife's silent suffering and the king's growing paranoia were two sides of the same dark coin. Together, they painted a portrait of a monarchy unraveling from within, haunted by its own sins. The true cost of ambition was not measured in crowns or titles, but in shattered minds and broken souls. From the glittering heights of the throne room to the suffocating depths of the dungeon, the story of power and its price continued to unfold. The king's victory was hollow, his legacy stained with secrets that refused to stay buried. And beneath it all, the shadowed birth that had set this tragedy in motion loomed ever larger, a reminder that some stories are born in darkness and never find the light dot in the oppressive silence of the dungeon. Time lost all meaning. Days blurred into nights, and nights stretched endlessly, marked only by the faintest echoes of the castle above. The woman who had once been a queen in her own right was reduced to a shadow, an invisible prisoner swallowed whole by darkness and despair. Her world shrank to the cold stone walls, the scant light of a flickering candle, and the weak cries of the infant she clung to as her only tether to life. Her isolation was absolute. No voices of comfort, no hands to soothe her aching body. The cruel irony was that though she was physically close to the throne, she was utterly severed from power and influence. Each passing hour deepened the void within her, eroding not only her body but the very core of her identity. Where once she had dreams and desires, now only echoes of fear and abandonment remained. The dungeon's silence was deafening, a sinister presence that pressed against her mind, forcing thoughts inward. Memories of the life she'd lost played like ghostly shadows. The grand halls, the adoring courtiers, the man who had promised to protect her. Those memories were weapons turned against her, each one a reminder of how far she had fallen. Her sanity became a fragile thread, stretched thin by isolation and despair. She wrestled with a mounting darkness, battling visions that crept at the edges of consciousness. Was she still a mother, a wife, a noblewoman, or merely a prisoner forgotten by the world above? The line between reality and nightmare blurred, and the dungeon seemed to whisper secrets only she could hear. Despite the crushing weight of her captivity, moments of fierce maternal love flickered through the gloom. The infant, born into this world of shadows, was both a blessing and a burden. The child's fragile life depended entirely on her strength, and in those moments she found fleeting purpose. Yet even this bond was tinged with sorrow. What future could this child have, born of such darkness and cruelty? Outside the prison walls, the kingdom carried on, indifferent or willfully blind to her suffering. The king's court thrived in opulence and intrigue, while she was erased from memory, a secret locked away beneath layers of stone and silence. Her plight was a whispered rumor, dismissed as mere court gossip. Yet the echoes of her pain resonated far beyond the dungeon's confines. This section reveals the devastating human cost of ambition and betrayal. The stark contrast between the lavish life above and the woman's brutal imprisonment exposes the hidden cruelties that power can unleash. Her psychological disintegration is not just a personal tragedy, but a reflection of a kingdom unraveling at its core. As the days slipped by, the silent prisoner's story was woven into the very fabric of the Casula haunting presence, a dark stain on a throne soaked in blood and lies. Her fate would remain a secret for now, but the shadows she cast would grow longer, reaching into the future of the royal line and the kingdom itself. Power in the royal court was a double-edged sword, glittering, crown forged amid thorns of betrayal and bitter family strife. Above the dungeon's unyielding stone, the king's reign unfolded like a grand play. But beneath the spectacle lay festering wounds that no silk or gold could conceal. The palace, with its opulent halls and ornate chambers, became a crucible of intrigue, where loyalty was a fragile veneer, and every smile concealed a dagger. The family, at the heart of this kingdom, was no sanctuary but a battleground. Siblings eyed one another with suspicion. Alliances forged in desperation shattered beneath the weight of ambition. The imprisoned queen's absence left a gaping void, one filled by whispered rumors and poisonous gossip. Courtiers debated her fate in hushed tones, some eager to exploit her disappearance for their own gain, others fearful of the shadows it cast over the throne. The contrast between the king's public grandeur and the family's private dysfunction was stark. Behind closed doors, the weight of secrecy suffocated every interaction. The heir, born in darkness, was both a symbol of hope and a living reminder of the family's fractures. The child's fragile presence inflamed tensions, forcing uneasy truces and deepening rivalries. Within the court, power was wielded like a weapon, used to manipulate, control, and destroy. The king's paranoia seeped into every corner, poisoning relationships and turning friends into foes. Secret meetings, coded messages, and sudden disappearances became routine. The palace's grand facade masked a landscape of fear where trust was a luxury none could afford. Amid this turmoil, the Queen's story became a ghostly refrain, told and retold in veiled warnings and bitter recriminations. Her fate was a dark mirror reflecting the kingdom's moral decay, a symbol of the cruelty lurking beneath regal splendor. The palace itself seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, a living reminder that power exacts its price in blood and sorrow. This section plunges into the heart of family, dysfunction and political intrigue, revealing how ambition fractures bonds and corrupts the soul of a dynasty. The king's throne is not just a seat of authority, but a throne of thorns where every victory is stained with pain and every alliance forged in shadow. As tensions escalate and secrets multiply, the kingdom teeters on the edge of chaos. The line between loyalty and betrayal blurs, and the fragile peace maintained by fear threatens to shatter. Behind the palace's gilded walls, the true cost of power reveals itself in fractured families and poisoned hearts. The story's dark undercurrents deepen here, setting the stage for the haunting legacy that will follow. The thorns entwined around the throne tighten their grip, promising that the crown's weight will crush all who dare to wear it. The child born within the dungeon's cold shadows carried a burden far heavier than any crown could impose. From the very moment of birth, this fragile life was marked not by innocence, but by the weight of a haunting legacy woven with secrecy, pain, and a fractured lineage that whispered of betrayal. The shadows of her origin clung tightly, shaping not only her destiny, but the future of the kingdom itself. Though she was the rightful heir, the child's existence was shrouded in silence and fear. Court whispers hinted at her true beginnings, but few dared speak openly of the woman who bore her in captivity. Her identity was a paradox, a living symbol of hope and ruin, innocence and inherited torment. This duality fractured her world, pulling her between longing for acceptance and the suffocating grip of secrets. Psychologically, the child wrestled with ghosts she never met, her absent mother swallowed by darkness, a father obsessed with power, and a legacy stained by cruelty. The palace's cold corridors echoed with expectations and suspicions, each glance weighed with judgment. She became a vessel for the past's sins, her every action scrutinized, her every step haunted by shadows she could neither escape nor fully understand. Yet within her flickered brief moments of fragile innocence, fleeting glimpses of a child yearning for love beyond the walls of intrigue. These moments were fragile refuges in a life dominated by political machinations and whispered threats. The tension between her innate humanity and the crushing weight of legacy created a silent turmoil that threatened to consume her from within. The haunting legacy extended beyond her psyche, seeping into the political fabric of the realm. Rival factions maneuvered, exploiting her obscured origins to undermine the throne. Each faction sought to weaponize the secrets of her birth, turning the hidden truths into arrows aimed at destabilizing the kingdom. The past refused to remain buried. It haunted the halls of power like a restless spectre. This section explores how trauma and secrecy perpetuate cycles of suffering, casting long shadows over generations. The child born in darkness becomes both a victim and a symbol living, testament to the cost of power built on cruelty. Her story underscores the tragic irony that legacies forged in pain often repeat their own torment as the child grows under the weight of these invisible chains. The kingdom braces for the storm. Her inheritance will unleash. The haunting legacy is a whisper that grows louder, promising that the sins of the past will not rest quietly. Beneath the throne's glittering surface lies a truth waiting to fracture everything. The once mighty king, hailed as a master of strategy and power, began to unravel beneath the weight of his own crown. Marble walls, gleaming chandeliers, and sprawling tapestries could no longer mask the growing darkness festering within his mind. His public image, once that of a confident and commanding ruler, fractured into something far more sinister. A man consumed by paranoia, cruelty, and the relentless ghosts of his past. As the days turned to months, the king's paranoia deepened like a poison coursing through his veins. Every whispered conversation, every hesitant glance in the great hall became a threat to be eliminated. Trusted advisors vanished overnight, replaced by sycophants who fed his growing obsession with control. His fear was not unfounded. The court was a nest of vipers, hungry for power and eager to exploit any weakness. Yet it was his own actions, the very cruelty that had secured his reign, that began to alienate those closest to him. Behind the marble facade, the king's cruelty grew unchecked. Punishments became brutal spectacles, designed not only to enforce loyalty, but to instill terror. The once vibrant court grew cold and silent, the laughter replaced by whispered dread. Those who crossed him disappeared into shadowy cells or faced public humiliation, their fates sealed by a ruler who saw betrayal lurking in every corner. But it was not only external enemies that haunted the king. His mind became a labyrinth of dark thoughts and torment. Nightmares plagued his sleep, visions of the dungeon where his wife languished, the cries of the child born in shadows, and the faces of those he had sacrificed for power. Madness crept in quietly, eroding his reason and twisting his sense of reality. His decisions grew erratic, his temper volatile. Advisors feared to approach, and the kingdom's stability wavered on the edge of collapse. This descent into madness was a cruel mirror of the woman's own psychological disintegration. Beneath the castle, where she was consumed by silence and despair, he was devoured by suspicion and rage. Both were prisoners, one behind stone walls, the other behind the fragile barrier of his sanity. Their fates intertwined, a tragic duet of ruin echoing through the corridors of power. The king's madness also unveiled the moral decay at the heart of his reign. Once celebrated for strength and wisdom, he became a symbol of tyranny and fear. His subjects whispered of a ruler unfit to govern, a man whose obsession with control had destroyed the very kingdom he sought to rule. The crown, heavy with blood and betrayal, pressed down relentlessly, crushing what remained of his humanity. Yet even as his world crumbled, the king clung desperately to his throne. The marble walls that surrounded him became a gilded cage, a prison of his own making. His fall was not swift but agonizing, a slow erosion of power, sanity, and dignity. The palace that once echoed with music and celebration now rang with the silence of fear and decay. This section reveals the psychological collapse of a ruler whose ambition paved the way for his undoing. It explores the eerie atmosphere of a court trapped between splendor and madness, where power's intoxicating allure turns swiftly to poison. The tragic contrast between public grandeur and private disintegration underscores the story's dark heart. As the king's grip weakens and madness tightens its hold, the kingdom stands on a precipice. The throne, once a beacon of authority, threatens to become a symbol of ruin. The shadows of the past grow longer, ready to engulf all who dare to sit upon it in the tangled web of royal ambition. Blood was spilled not just in battlefields, but behind the velvet curtains of the palace. The court became a stage for treachery, where every smile hid a dagger and every handshake masked a threat. Betrayal was currency, bought and sold by those desperate enough to seize power in a kingdom unraveling at its seams. The wife's torment in the dungeon was mirrored by political assassinations and ruthless schemes above. The king's paranoia had fractured alliances, and factions jockeyed for influence with deadly intent. Whispered plots grew louder in shadowed halls, friends turned foes, and loyalty was a fragile facade, masking deeper betrayals. The very fabric of the monarchy was tearing apart, thread by bloody thread. Each act of betrayal cut deeper than any sword. Trusted advisors were poisoned by ambition or eliminated in the dead of night, their disappearances sparking fear and suspicion. Family members, once bound by blood, became pawns and predators, alike engaged in a brutal game where only the most ruthless survived. The throne, coveted by many, was stained with the blood of those who dared to challenge the king's authority or the secrets that bound him. The child born in the dungeon, a living symbol of the kingdom's fractured soul, became an unwitting participant in these deadly games. Her claim to the throne was both a blessing and a curse, making her a target for those eager to extinguish the last flicker of legitimacy or exploit her as a pawn in their ruthless gambits. Her innocence was weaponized, and the line between victim and perpetrator blurred in the cruel calculus of survival. Emotional intensity reached its peak as trust dissolved into fear and suspicion. The palace, once a place of grandeur, felt more like a haunted house where every shadow concealed a threat. The walls that witnessed whispered plots and secret rendezvous seemed to close in tighter, suffocating any hope of peace or unity. This section exposes the raw and brutal nature of political power, a world where betrayal is inevitable and mercy is rare. It illustrates how the personal becomes political and how the sins of the past bleed into the present, with devastating consequences. The moral ambiguity deepens as victims become aggressors, and survival often demands a ruthless heart. As the blood spilled and alliances shattered, the monarchy's foundation grew unstable. The kingdom was on the brink of chaos, teetering between fragile order and total collapse. The echoes of betrayal promised a reckoning that would shake the very pillars of power, beneath the castle's grandeur and far from the eyes of the world. The forgotten queen's final days unfolded in a silence as cold and unyielding as the dungeon walls themselves. She was a woman, erased her existence, reduced to a whispered secret, her suffering concealed behind layers of stone and indifference. Her slow descent into oblivion was marked not by the pageantry of courts, but by the relentless erosion of body and spirit. Her confinement had stretched beyond endurance. Hunger gnawed at her flesh. The dampness seeped into her bones. Yet the cruelest torment was the absence of light. Not just the physical darkness of the prison, but the shadow of abandonment that swallowed her whole. Time lost meaning as days bled into nights, each indistinguishable from the last. The world she once knew became a fading memory, replaced by an unrelenting void, her mind fractured under the weight of isolation and despair. The woman who had borne a child in those brutal conditions clung to fading shards of hope, fragments of love, memories of a life stolen. Yet as the days passed, hope withered, replaced by a hollow numbness. The dungeon's silence became a deafening echo, amplifying her erasure from history's pages. Outside, the king's reign faltered. His grip weakened as paranoia consumed him. But none in the court dared remember the woman whose sacrifice had paved his path to power. The queen's disappearance was never questioned, allowed a silence, both willful and complicit. Her name vanished from records. Her story was a ghost, haunting the shadows yet denied voice. The chilling quiet of her end contrasts starkly with the turmoil that gripped the throne above. Her forgotten death became a metaphor for all who suffer unseen in the pursuit of power. The absence of mourning, the erasure of memory, became the final cruelty and injustice. As profound as the physical chains that bound her, this section reveals the ultimate price of political ambition, the erasure of humanity. It draws a tragic portrait of a woman who was not only imprisoned by stone walls, but by the indifference of a kingdom. Her fall is a haunting reminder that history often remembers the victors, but forgets the victory sacrifices that secured their victory, as the dungeon's cold embraces claimed her. The story turned darker still, setting the stage for the collapse that awaited the king, and the legacy that would haunt the kingdom's future. Her forgotten existence was a silent scream beneath the throne's gleam, a warning that power built on cruelty is destined to crumble. The throne, once a beacon of unchallenged authority, began to tremble under the weight of its own sins. The king, whose rise was paved with betrayal and blood, now faced the unraveling of the kingdom he had fought so desperately to command. The facade of power cracked, revealing a fragile seat held together by fear, paranoia, and broken promises. Allies turned away, their loyalty fractured by the king's growing instability and the haunting legacy of secrets that clung to his reign. Rebellions sparked in distant provinces, fueled by whispers of tyranny and the absence of justice. The very nobility that once bowed in submission now questioned his right to rule, their ambitions kindled by the scent of weakness. The palace, once vibrant with courtly splendor, fell into a somber silence. Echoes of laughter and music were replaced by the hushed murmur of conspiracy and dread. The marble walls that had witnessed the king's rise now bore witness to his foliage crack and shadow, a testament to the decay spreading from within. The king's mental deterioration accelerated. His decisions became erratic, his grasp on reality slipping as madness tightened its grip. Counselors found themselves navigating a labyrinth of fear and suspicion, unsure whether their words would soothe or enrage the monarch. The kingdom's stability teetered on a knife's edge, balanced precariously between order and collapse. The child born in darkness, once a symbol of hope, was thrust into a world of uncertainty and danger. Her claim to the throne became both a beacon and a target, as factions fought to control the remnants of a fractured monarchy. The legacy of shadows that haunted her birth now threatened to consume the entire realm. This section captures the tragic collapse of a kingdom undone by its own darkest secrets. The juxtaposition of past glory and present ruin paints a vivid picture of power's fragility when built on foundations of cruelty and deceit. The crumbling throne is not just a physical downfall, but a moral and psychological unraveling that echoes the fate of those who once sought to claim it. As the kingdom edges closer to chaos, the echoes of betrayal and madness resonate louder, setting the stage for the final reckoning. The story moves toward a conclusion as inevitable as it is tragic, a haunting reminder that empires built on blood often bleed out from within. The shadows of this tragic tale stretch far beyond the cold stone walls and gilded halls where it first unfolded. History does not easily forget such darkness, but it often buries it beneath layers of myth, silence, and selective memory. The echoes of cruelty, madness, and broken lives ripple through time, haunting not only the kingdom's ruins, but the hearts of those who remember and those who choose to forget. The story of a woman who gave birth in a dungeon, sacrificed for a throne, lingers as a ghostly whisper in the corridors of history. It is a reminder that beneath the pomp of crowns and ceremonies lies a world shaped by hidden suffering and moral ambiguity. The legacies left behind are complex, woven from both triumph and tragedy, glory and grief. This final chapter reflects on the enduring impact of power built on cruelty. The kingdom may have fallen, the king may have lost his mind, and the forgotten queen may have vanished into silence, but their story lives on. It serves as a cautionary tale about the cost of ambition when it strips away humanity and the fragile ties that bind us. The psychological wounds inflicted ripple through generations, shaping destinies in ways unseen but deeply felt. The child born in darkness carries this burden, a living testament to the shadows cast by her origins. Her struggle symbolizes the inescapable weight of history, a past that refuses to remain buried. As viewers, we are invited to confront these echoes, to listen to the stories that history's loudest voices try to silence. In understanding the hidden cruelties and moral complexities, we gain insight into the human condition, its capacity for both darkness and resilience. The tale closes not with resolution, but with a lingering question. How many other stories like this remain hidden in the shadows of power? How many lives have been sacrificed on altars of ambition, never recorded, never mourned? In the silence that follows, the echoes persist, a haunting legacy urging us to remember, to question, and to learn from the darkness that once shaped a kingdom and its forgotten queen.